Greetings. Just in time, are you not? Thou art safe now. Do not be bashful.
And welcome back to another lore episode. Last week we talked about, we started talking about Carim, and I am Silvermont, or you can call me Alex, so let's get this going. As I said, last week we started talking about Carim. We talked about the city earldoms and earls, Chester and Cheshires, and Marvellous Chester himself. I explained my reasoning for my belief that Chester is the Earl of Carim, Earl Astor, who may have once been a knight before assassinating the Earl and taking his place. We speculated as to what time period he came from, and why he may have been snatched by manners into the past, and as usual we came up with some good discussion. That is something the Souls community can do like no other, generate great discussion about the game without even talking about the gameplay. From Software and Miyazaki deserve to be lauded for what they've done, and I meant lauded as in L-A-U-D-E-D, not to be made into lords. At any rate, I read a quote once, I believe by Miyazaki, stating that he wanted Dark Souls to have that same sort of feel people have when sitting around a bonfire, sharing tales, and I believe they achieved that, which is something very impressive beyond merely designing a game that's fun to play. But let's move on lest I be labelled sycophant. I'm no toady. So last week we covered the land of Carim itself and Marvellous Chester. Today we're going to talk about another character from Carim, Oswald the Pardoner. Looking at the Carim trio, I believe it's safe to say they're all rascals of some sort, no? True, Chester and Lautrec can be thorns in our side, whereas Oswald exists to help us for the most part. But there is something sinister about the Pardoner, and no mistake. From his black garb to his cackles, even to the strange and somewhat infamous pose that he's standing in, how can we forget? All sin is his domain. For Oswald is a pardoner, and in the service of Velka, the raven-haired goddess of sin. Let's start per the norm with Oswald's name, then move on to his location, in-game and story purpose. So according to some sources, Oswald is a name of Old German or Anglo-Saxon origin and means, well, take your pick. Divine ruler, divine power, godly ruler, God's power, and so forth. And how fitting are those? I mean, Oswald is no king as far as we know, but he does wield a god's power in her name. I don't know the process through which From name their characters, but they seem to do a great job at it, if you ask me. A good great. Yeah, that's even better than a good and a great job. So we find Oswald, rather disconcertingly, popping out of thin air after destroying the gargoyles and ringing the first bell. He's there at the bottom of the ladder where moments ago there was nobody. Where did he come from? Did he follow us, or did ringing the bell merely grant us the ability to perceive him? At any rate, he's standing in an interesting pose and seems like he could be welcoming us, or even opening his arms for an embrace. He's also kind of stuck in the middle of the well, what is it gesture, which players are very fond of, along with the look skyward and point downwards gestures, I suppose you could call them. But what is he doing there? Does he believe that now we've rung the bell we will have need of his services? Was he sent by Velka, or did he come of his own volition? From a gameplay perspective, Oswald serves several roles. Firstly, he's a merchant and sells us situational but very useful items, such as purging stones, in case the player is cursed. I believe when the game came out, he was the only way to cure yourself of curses in the depths, with the exception of the sealer, maybe? Because the female undead merchant didn't sell purging stones back then, as far as I can recall. Fun fact, I've never been cursed in all my time playing Dark Souls. Anyway, besides selling us spells, equipment, and consumables, he also grants us indictments and the Book of the Guilty. Furthermore, we can use him to absolve our sins, in case we abandoned our covenants or struck down friendly NPCs. And yes, you can also use him to safely leave any covenants you're in, without sinning. Originally he would sell an item that would allow you to leave your covenant, but that was removed from the game and instead it was just made into a dialogue option with him. But all of this he does in the name of Velka. Her domain is sin, and it is only human to commit a sin, according to Oswald. What is considered sinning in Dark Souls though? Breaking your covenant, for starters. Killing friendly NPCs also counts, and I think invading counts, but only if they indict you. I'm not quite sure on that. You can indict dark wraiths and forest hunters, strangely, but you can't indict Blades of the Darkmoon. Speaking of which, have you ever considered how strange it is that two gods are in such an arrangement? Here, let's read out the description of the Book of the Guilty. The goddess of sin, Velka, oversees this list of the guilty who have disrespected the gods or their covenants, and shall one day face the wrath of the Blades of the Darkmoon. So one god oversees the list, and another god oversees the actual punishment. Isn't that rather odd? Why isn't Velka the leader of the Blades of the Darkmoon? I mean, does that refer to Gwyndolin? I mean, he is the Dark Sun, Gwyndolin, not the Dark Moon. We know that Gwyndolin has an affinity to the moon, but still. Where does Darkmoon come from? Gwyndolin calls himself, in dialogue, the Dark Sun, and I believe his name as a boss, like above his health bar, is Dark Sun Gwyndolin. But he also mentions the Dark Moon, which, another weird thing to note is Dark Sun is 2 words, whereas Dark Moon is all 1 word. O disciple of the Dark Sun, thou hast journeyed far, hear my voice. If thou shalt swear by the covenant to become a shadow of Father Gwyn and Sister Guinevere, a blade that shall hunt the foes of our lords, then I shall protect thee, safeguarding thy person with the power of the Darkmoon. So was this just an arrangement of convenience? Gwyndolin seems to suggest that the power of the Darkmoon is his to control, or so it seems that the Covenant is truly his. But was that always the way? Did Darkmoon once refer to Velka, perhaps? Or is it just a reference to how Gwyndolin is extremely feminine? For example, if everyone knows about the Blades of the Darkmoon and knows Gwyndolin is the leader, maybe it is assumed Gwyndolin is a female. So we know that he hides away, but then he refers to himself as the Dark Sun, 2 words, Darkmoon as 1 word. It's rather hard to know though, because at any rate, Velka and the Darkmoon have many ties to each other. You could think that the Blades of the Darkmoon and the Pardoners are like partners in crime. They work together in some capacity, like the Marines and the Navy, the FBI and the CIA, or however you want to compare it to. What is more interesting though, is that Oswald is present in the game and working for Velka, who is not present. As far as we know anyway. Some speculate that she is the raven who carries us from the undead asylum. If so, what could that mean? Remember that Gwyndolin and Frampt are working together. Is there some plot with Gwyndolin and Velka? Do they have the same goals? Or does Velka wish to punish and execute even Gwyndolin for some sin he may have committed? Maybe he wrested control of the Blades of the Darkmoon away from Velka. Who knows? Velka seems to be on our side though, by and large. If the raven is her doing, and she also sends Oswald to assist us in some small capacity, maybe she wants us to succeed at whatever our goal is, whatever ending we happen to choose. So maybe she doesn't mind whether we go for the, the Link the Fire or the Dark Lord ending. She's certainly one of the more mysterious gods in the game, along with Flame God Flan. We know very little about either of them. Velka is heard of, but never seen in game. And some even speculate that she will feature in Dark Souls 2. Perhaps that she's even the lady in the very first trailer. What do you think? Was that her? Or maybe it was one of her priests? Well, priestess, whatever. But putting aside the connection between Gwyndolin and Velka for a moment, let's think a moment on Oswald and the Painted World. See, there are some signs of Velka in the Painted World. For starters, we have those harpy creatures, half bird, half female. Just what are those? Velka's followers? Or perhaps they were cursed and punished by Velka. They drop souvenirs of reprisal, the ears of corpses of sinners, cut off as trophies. Lautrec drops one too, and he is a confirmed sinner, despite, weirdly, acting for his god. At least, that is one reason for his misdoings. But if the crow/raven demons drop this, what could it mean? It seems to indicate that they are sinners. Perhaps they have indeed been twisted into this form by Velka. What other animal-human hybrids do we see in Dark Souls? I can only really think of Kalag and her sister, who were turned that way by the Chaos, as far as I can recall. Is that what happened to the Harpies? Were they twisted by Chaos? Or were they merely given that form by Velka? Also in the Painted World we find Priscilla, who could be a potential daughter of Velka. and we also find the black cleric suit that Oswald wears, along with Velka's rapier, a symbolic, powerful thrusting sword used by the Pardoner serving Velka, goddess of sin. It is no mere symbol, to be sure. The Pardoner is an inhuman swordsman, and wields this enchanted blade with special sword technique. Some people take this to mean that we found Oswald's corpse from another timeline or something, but I think it's far more likely that this was just another Pardoner. It doesn't mention Oswald whatsoever after all, it merely states the Pardoner is an inhuman swordsman. But I don't feel that it is referring to any specific man, but rather that all Pardoners are, very competent swordsmen. Still, why do we find a Pardoner in the painted world? Did they want to be there? Were they sucked in and unable to find a way of escape? Or perhaps it was their duty to watch over the creatures of the painted world, many of whom could likely be sinners, and the Pardoner was there to offer them the services of Velka, being pardoned of sins and such. And just what could have killed them? Murder? Old age? A disease? Something else? If you look at where the corpse is found, it almost looks like it could have been dropped from that tall tower, wherein you find the red sign soapstone at the top of the spiral staircase. Dropped, or pushed maybe, or maybe they just fell. Clumsy fall. And here's an interesting thing to consider. Oswald has dialogue that implies he had something to do with humanity. Just take a listen to this.
If thou desirest to preserve thy humanity, then confess thy misdoings to me.
It seems to suggest that confessing to him would either restore your humanity, or allow you to do so. Could it be that sinning and hollowing were once tied together? The more you sinned, the more your character would hollow, and having unresolved sins would prevent you from restoring your humanity. Or perhaps it was just some dialogue they recorded for the sake of it. You never know. Fun to consider, though, that Oswald also knows about Petrus, and knows of his sins, meaning that even if we didn't deal with Petrus, the fool isn't long for this world, most likely. Oswald wasn't the only one who seemed to know of Petrus's true nature. But even though Oswald is friendly enough to us, and he also bids us a warm welcome, there is something sinister about him, from the way he talks to his sallow-skinned appearance. So very fitting for a man of Carim. Even whilst he smiles and holds out his arms to us, he deigns to mock us.
Hast thou acquaintance with Petrus of Thoroland? I wager you two had likely found much in common. For is he not too drenched in sin? Much trouble hast thou caused. Thou wast weak in spirit, broken by the weight of thy sin.